Okay, good afternoon, Numi Nation. Van here with our end of the day for episode 16. Can you believe it? That's 3 weeks plus one, 3 weeks of 5 days of nonstop broadcast of New Minds TV in response to the crazy topsy-turvy world that we're in. So I'm so excited that we have, with a little growth mindset and ingenuity, we have overcome the technical limitations that I personally experienced on Friday. We were supposed to bring today's guest in on Friday, and I had some obstacles and had to take a plan B on Friday, but we worked through them. So today we are going to have the honor of chatting with Kathy Cordero. So I have known Kathy for many years, working directly with her and her kids, but she is here as an expert. I might even say master, might even stretch and say guru of homeschooling, because not only has she done it with her own brilliant kiddos, but spent many years kind of like overseeing homeschool groups, and is most recently the author of Awesome Math, Teaching Mathematics with Problem-Based Learning. All that to say, she's got some hardcore academic chops to boot. So there's so many reasons we could have Kathy on, but the reason I have her on now for a little chat is because I just want to walk you back a little bit through last week. So last week the theme was homeschool hacks. And so Kathy, if you don't mind, I'm just going to do a little walkthrough of last week, the highlight topics, to kind of walk us straight into the conversation today and give you a little bit of context. And then I'll stop yapping for a little bit. But so way back last Monday, I kind of opened the week and promised the world that that was going to be the week of homeschool hacks, little easy, pragmatic takeaways that the millions of parents around the world could use who suddenly find themselves in this strange new world that's new for them. It's not new for you, and it's not new for many others, but we're all lacking some of the experiential wisdom that you bring. So on Monday, we talked about I'm going to have to go out of order because I'm drawing a blank for Monday. But on Tuesday, I talked about maximizing efficiency with the Pomodoro technique, which is breaking down tasks into units of deep concentration. The traditional one for adults is about a 25-minute chunk, and you set a timer for 25 minutes, and you take a break. It's really important that you take a 5-minute break, and then you do your next Pomodoro chunk. And if you didn't know, you probably do. Pomodoro is Italian for tomate, okay? So it got named that way because the originator had a little old school kitchen timer shaped like a tomato, right? Then we talked about on Wednesday the 1% rule, which is learning how to invest and use your energy in the wisest possible way so that you're putting maximum energy in your, it's finite, right? The given amount of patience and energy you have as a homeschool parent in a day is finite. So how can you maximize results with that limited resource? And that's where we talked about the Pareto Principle. That was Monday, right? That was the 80-20 rule. You're grinning. Wow. So you're kind of with me because I sent you the notes ahead of time. You probably have the outline there. So the Pareto Principle, that was Monday. So the 80-20 rule, basically this idea that, about 80% of our results come from 20% of our efforts. So what I did was I broke it down into a step-by-step process for a homeschool parent. Like on any given day, look at your child's task list and choose the 20%. So I said, if you said you had about 5-6 tasks in a day, star the top 2 and see how you can funnel all your energy into those, right? And then we had a good session last week on mindfulness, because we started to realize, you know what? All these methods are great, but if you have the wrong part of your brain turned on because you're in fight or flight, you're in high anxiety mode, we know that literally parts of your brain that maximize learning and memory are turned off. So all these great hacks are useless if you don't have a way to kind of reground and resettle you and your child, because you're kind of mirroring this process for your child. And so then that kind of brought us to Friday, which was going to be the great, grand finale chat with you. We had our difficulties, so instead I just gave a little summary. But here we are. I want to keep it pretty informal and give you the opportunity to just reflect on what you see as a person who, voluntarily homeschooled for many years with great success. You're seen as a mentor in the homeschooling world for other parents and families. What's, just to start off, to not go too deep quick, but what would be like the first few pieces of advice you would give for someone involuntarily in this situation right now?
I would absolutely say to make sure you not only have great mindfulness with it, as you said, but playful mindfulness is probably the way I would put it, which is something I absolutely adore about New Minds to begin with, right? Is that playful nature. Because if you give your kids an assignment and you're not into it, they're absolutely not going to be into it, right? And so that was one of the big things. And then, to kind of tag on to that, there are so many great tools and methodologies out there. And I think sometimes we evaluate ourselves based on what we should be doing, and not giving ourselves enough grace for what we've actually accomplished. And sometimes those days of accomplishing something means you've just read a long book out loud to your kid all day long in your pajamas with popcorn. And that's a great day.
And that could be a win, right? Yeah.
Yes. There's some days where I had a great plan in place and, we ended up not following through. But what we did instead wasn't any less valuable, right? Because it was time together, it was connecting, it was bibliotherapy, talking about the book, talking about the themes. So I would say, have fun with it and be kind to yourself would probably be my main messages for any parent.
I love that. And I love that you're giving us some real talk too about like the reality of what can go down in a well-planned day when things don't kind of come together like that. Because I know directly, and I assume that a lot of these new homeschool parents started this off a few weeks ago with super, tight ships. They had their daily schedule, they had their routine, they knew how it was going to go down, and then entropy, right? It all kind of starts to fall apart. And I love it because you, as an experienced homeschooler, just laid it out as real talk, like that is reality. So here's what I see is the key. You were able to roll with it. And maybe in that moment you did feel a little anxiety, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to fall behind or whatever, but you produced some brilliant kiddos using that method. So how do you think you can help a parent when they have those days when it just all seems to explode in front of them and the schedule is in the trash bin by 9 a.m.? How can they sort of embrace that and not lose faith that it's going to be okay?
Well, that grace part is a huge part of it, but you hit on the biggest 4-letter word that's in homeschooling, which is gaps. And any homeschooler will just lose their mind. Oh, there's going to be a gap, we're missing. Because I did that. I created school at home, and it was a huge failure. And there were two things that were a problem. One, as a mom, especially, but any parent too, that love is supposed to be unconditional. And when you're a teacher, you're a judge. You're saying this work is good or this work is bad.
Right.
And that is, it's hard, because sometimes my kids turned out really crappy work. Right. And so, and that's okay. That's the whole point of a growth mindset, right? Is that you need to be like, oh, wow, we can really work with this and let's figure out, or what else could you do? So you have to you have to be guiding them towards truth and not be a judge, because the minute you're a judge, their little souls are crushed. And that's when you're going to start getting into power struggles. So as far as a methodology, I think it's super important to have some strategic goals, right? Like, you kind of your overarching goals. We're going to accomplish science today and this, that, and the other. But the initiatives that you take to reach those goals aren't going to be this straight path.
Yeah.
So what I found was I would have kind of a spine curriculum that I would use as my, this is the balance beam that we're on. But we would jump off right and left and come up with different creative ways to accomplish that balance beam, right? So it doesn't mean, so you can buy a curriculum and follow it, but don't use it as a spine and bring in other things so that you add dimensions to it and you can make it playful and you can make it fun. So for example, and homeschooling is a broad range. The way you homeschool a first grader is way different than how you homeschool a middle schooler versus a kid who's in college, right? You have to be super cognizant of what you're doing. But for the elementary and middle school crowd, ancient numbers are such a fun topic because it's math. And, obviously I'm partial to mathematics programs. Yeah. There's math games. You can learn how to multiply in Egyptian. We would make Egyptian food. We'd learn that, Pythagoras was a really weird dude and told all of our, Pythagoras stories. Don't eat beans, or because every time you pass gas, your soul is escaping, right? So, you can make it fun and you can bring in these things and still accomplish learning arithmetic and measurement and all of that. So allow yourselves to be creative and have fun with it, and don't judge yourself too hard.
And it sounds like you didn't say this directly, but it sounds like if you just hold that spine as your roadmap, the little exits that you take for exploration, you can base them on your child's own inherent passions and curiosities, or even your own, because you mentioned right off the bat that one of the traps is if you're trying to teach your kiddo at home with something that you have absolutely zero interest or passion for, that's going to get kind of transmitted. So it sounds like if you take this approach of like, okay, there's this loose spine, it's like the skeletal structure, but I can flesh that out with topics and subjects and sidetracks that are fascinating for my kids. That sounds a lot more exciting to me, right?
It's fascinating for you. You guys are on a journey of knowledge together, right? There's a lot of stuff I don't remember from, elementary school, middle school, all, going on. And so just researching it, I was like, that's really cool. And you get into this process of this quest for truth, right? Yeah. That just makes all of it so much more engaging to be with the kids. And I just thought of something else and it went right out of my head. That's okay.
No.
It'll come back. There's that grace part again, right?
There you go.
But, it's definitely give yourself the room to figure it out. And even if you're, like I said, drawing or making pictures, there's so many different ways that you can engage in that material. And like you said, use that roadmap so that you don't feel like you have, gaps, and you're still, you're accomplishing things, throughout the day. But most importantly, you're developing that relationship with your kids.
Yeah.
So my guys are 20 and 23 now. And, there were many, many moments when we were going through that gauntlet process where I was terrified and thought I was doing it completely wrong and everything was wrong. But that relationship was there because we spent that time together and we developed trust. And in the long run, that's more important than anything.
Absolutely. That's been one of my messages on these end of day notes, is to help parents try to see this as just a wildly auspicious opportunity for them to spend deep time with their kids that would probably never happen, probably will never happen again in their lifetimes. And what you just said touched on that beautifully, is the potential for the depth of connection you can develop with your kid during these times may totally outweigh any of the academic concerns. I want to turn it to another practical question that I think parents are struggling with too. Like, because, if you engineer a homeschooling life and you plan for it and build it, that's one thing. But we have parents now who, it was thrust upon them. They're still trying to work remotely. They got their telework going on. They've got their Zoom meetings going on throughout the day. And they're uncertain how to balance, like, how much time do I spend with direct engagement with my kids' curriculum? I've got this online school with my school, but I've also got to take care of my meetings and my business. I feel guilty, leaving them alone for a while. Like, how did you find yourself balancing that? Because you worked as well. I mean, you worked in different organizations and things while you were homeschooling. How did you kind of balance that? How much direct hands-on time versus... Yeah.
That is such a great question. And I think in the end, you have to realize that it has to be a partnership. You are in a partnership with your kids. So I would always kind of set the day at the beginning and say, hey, listen, I really need your help. I need this amount of time during these hours to do what I need to do. What's something fun that you would like, right? And you kind of develop that contract, right? Where it's, everybody has different wants, wishes, and desires. And we all have an innate need to be heard and to feel like we're truly being listened to. So it was always approaching it from that level of respect. I will respect your time and you respect mine. And then as far as the other half of your question, how much is enough time at the party, right? Parents need to understand that you're no longer, homeschooling becomes a way of life. It becomes ingrained in your fiber. Everything is a learning moment. Everything's a learning opportunity. Yeah. And so you're going to find your own mind alight with things. I mean, I was not a math major. Here I am working in mathematics, right? I ended up loving it because of my kids and coaching their math counts teams. And we went to state. I mean, it was an incredible experience because I was willing to put my ego on the table. And know it was going to be thoroughly stomped on. As the parent, you don't have to know everything. Mm-hmm. It's like I said, you're making that contract with them, you're learning with them, and you're going on the journey with them. And then as far as the time involved, some days are going to be bad, like as far as accomplishing your goals, right? But you have to remember there's so much wasted time in school. And if every moment's a learning moment and you're basically homeschooling 7 days a week as opposed to just during school hours when they're shuffling to lunch and they're talking to friends and all of that, I think it's more important to learn in friendship and enjoy each other and have that respect and those contracts than it is to really get too beat down with a schedule. And let me just say, I was the total beat 'em over the head with the schedule parent. Like that's absolutely how I started. We had little desks and we were going to do it and we were going to do quality work and that was the way it was going to be. Yeah. And I almost, it went really badly. In fact, I read a book on, it was called Homeschooling Gifted Kids by Lisa Rivero. And it kind of turned me around to, it was like, oh, it doesn't have to be like school. You're not recreating school at home.
Right.
You're creating an environment that is a growth mindset in every single thing that you, right? Yeah. And so we actually went to listen to her speak, and my now 23-year-old, he must have been 4 or 5, and he went up to her at the end and he said, "Thank you so much for helping my mom." It made his life so much better. My oldest guinea pig.
That is beautiful. Yeah, he could definitely appreciate that. He could feel the downstream effects. So there's so much beauty in your answer. There's so much to unpack. I won't try to unpack it all, but I want to zoom back a little bit when you were talking about, you were tackling the question about time management. And I love how you made it a conversation with the child. Like, hey, I need to get this done today. How do you think we could manage this time? What is a constructive way you think you could use this time? They then have some skin in the game and, sense of accountability. And again, it goes both ways as well. And then I love how that builds the relationship. I love how you're, openly vulnerable about how you started off like very schedule driven, you had this vision and then you just had to like let that go and you found the right research to help you do that. So I guess this ties in a little bit too to one of the concepts from last week was this concept of, you don't have to learn calculus every day. Like that's where the 1% concept came in. Like if it feels small sometimes on a day by day basis, but if you have improved 1% in a particular area over time, there's a cumulative effect. And if you combine that with the way you opened of being able to kind of roll with the flow a little bit, like I love the example you gave too of like maybe you had this agenda in mind for the day, but you ended up making it a day-long read aloud. But oh my goodness, the power of literature, a full day immersion in literature could do wonders, right? So to have that opportunity. And then just circling it back to like
And
what turned out to be a theme for this conversation, which is grace, which is giving yourself grace and compassion, and just understanding that, it's a tricky, messy situation. And if you move forward with grace, you're much more likely to find success. Would you agree?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And not only that, your kids some grace too. I mean, I kind of got really trained on how to homeschool my oldest. And I was like, oh man, I can totally homeschool these kinds of guys. And then my youngest came along and I was like, oh, I don't know how to do anything because he was so different than his brother. So I, like in my awesome math book, I talk about finding your Venn, which is kind of thinking back. I to tell parents, think back to your 7-year-old self. And what are 3 defining characteristics that have stayed with you your whole life, right? So not interests that change. I don't mean like, oh, I love dinosaurs, right? But maybe it's that kid who's so crazy into dinosaurs. They know all the names and the classifications, and they've just got that bug. And that's that research person, right? Or the ones that, memorize baseball cards, and they're just so good at that. My youngest is very physical. And a lot, both Ben and Justin worked with Adam, and they were able to tap that physical nature of his because he processes information through movement. And my oldest processes information through solitude. So you actually really have to give your kids grace. They're not going to learn the same way you learned. You're not going to learn the same way they are. So it really does, at the beginning, it's kind of important to just figure out what you're working with. Or even kids. I had a consult for a family whose kids suffer from dysgraphia, right? And in mathematics, a lot of times kids with dyslexia and dysgraphia are incredible 3-dimensional thinkers. Like they can put together X models and things and never use they just look at the picture. So we do a lot in our math group with visual proofs and things like that, just figuring out what makes that kid tick, that finding your Venn diagram, right?
I love that.
3 things that and that's hard. Like that's going to be the hardest exercise you do. It's not easy.
Yeah, but it circles back to my comment a few minutes ago of like, what a golden opportunity for so many parents to be immersed with their kid. And I've been getting so many stories about parents with multiple kids at home, like at the same time right now. And each one is like a completely different homeschool story. Like there's no formula, just like you said, between your oldest and youngest, right? And so what a chance to find their Venn and sort of adapt, your approach for each of them. It's going to be really individualized. I know Mr. Justin has 2 at home of different ages, totally different paradigms that he has to approach it with. So before I forget, I want to give people an opportunity to find your book. Would you mind either now or as soon as we're done going live, in the comments, could you post a link to the Awesome Math book so people can find it?
Absolutely.
And also,
and I'm happy to email too, if anybody has questions.
That was my next question. Like how can people reach out to you? Because I know, like when you were talking about finding your Venn, I know some ears perked up from parents because they're like, yes, I need some help right now from someone. So if you're willing to share how people can use you as a resource. I know you're doing some consulting, and now could be the moment for a lot of families to get some help.
Well, and also, if you're working with your kids, and like I said, that judge role is hard. Like you have a really hard time with them, or they have a hard time submitting work to you, especially writing. For some reason, when somebody writes something, they really put their soul out there. And they want mom and dad to say, oh, it's amazing. I love it. And so, a lot of times it's actually helpful if you can give that accountability to somebody else. So I know when my kids were little, I actually had them text their writing to their grandmother. And I would actually grade it, but it was coming from her,
I love
right?
That.
Because but you could even set up like a different kind of alter ego email account, right? And you can still grade it, but I don't mean to be, don't lie to your kids, right? But there's just something about, well, let's just submit it to this writing email, and we can give you some good feedback right? Bring yourself out of the equation. It has to be used really carefully, right? Like you don't want the writing teacher to say, wow, you got to go back and read, it's always constructive and kind guidance 100% of the time.
The phrase that came to mind as you were talking about that is like, that's the hack called outsource the bad cop, right? Because as the parent, you have to be both the good and bad cop. If you can outsource that bad cop, you can take a little bit of that pressure off. So, we have a couple comments here I want to share before we close. We got Mr. Justin chiming in. He says, "You're such an amazing resource, Kathy. And having worked with one of your boys, I can personally attest that you walk the talk of happy homeschooling and balance. Hashtag rockstar mom."
And that's after a lot of mistakes, Justin. So I appreciate that. But that's where that grace concept was hard earned.
Yeah, exactly. And that comes back to what I want to repeat is grace. You mentioned growth mindset a few times. You didn't use this word, but I've used it a couple of times. Seeing this experience almost as a laboratory, and like the design process. It's almost like the design process, right? You'll put something out there that's like an MVP. You'll see how it goes. It might flop. You take feedback, you go back to the drawing board the next day, and it might be a different process with each of your kids. So it's really necessary to have that growth mindset and just embrace the fail that's going to come.
You hit the nail on the head with it, guys. I think people forget that feedback loop a lot. Whether it's once a week or just, kind of an informal thing at the end of the day, take your kid's temperature. Let's reflect back on this day. What did you like? What didn't you like? And they have to, teach them good argumentation. Everybody thinks argumentation is bad, but argumentation is phenomenal, right? That's where if you have in your mindset that you're on a quest for truth, then that changes, everything that you do. Because I'll tell you, I had my kids pegged wrong at the beginning, and we did some wrong things. Like, so for my youngest, for example, I to teach him to read, I just, my older son just kind of learned word groupings kind of on his own, lots of hop on pop and things like that when he was younger, and we were able to kind of work through it that way. So I didn't really have a methodology, but I decided to do it better the next time and bring in all of this phonics stuff. And I slowed him down. It was the absolute worst thing that I could do. And if I'd had some kind of more of a feedback loop and really talk to them and discuss them, what do you like? And luckily I had another mom that was ahead of me that was like, that doesn't seem to be working for him. Like, to just give myself permission to dump something was really hard at the beginning. And I remember that. And so I'm going to keep focusing on that grace word. Give yourself room to be like, you know what? All of this does not work for my kid. Mm-hmm. And I had a closet full of unused curriculum. And as they got older, that got less and less. I got to know them better. I got to find their Venn. But if you don't have those feedback channels, and that's the other thing, what works for 1 year isn't going to work the next year. So you've got different kids, and they grow and they pick up different things. And so that dialogue, if you start it early, you're going to keep it. And they're going to continue to dialogue with you even through, big kids, big problems, little kids, little problems, right? Mm-hmm. Right? As they get older and complex, you're setting a framework to discuss those with them.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so to kind of wrap up, I just want to kind of bring it full circle and thank you for joining us today and sharing this. I bet you would have never imagined 1 year ago that the world would be looking to you as, the savior for this new homeschool reality that we're in. Just an opportunity for you to share your wisdom, and we really, really appreciate it. And of course, you have many areas of expertise, like I said at the opening. This just happens to be one that's super poignant right now. And I noticed that you just dropped your direct email in the comments. So if you're watching, you can reach out to Kathy directly for support, for a consult, for guidance, for coaching. And Justin also dropped the link to the Awesome Math book in there as well, which I highly recommend. It's just like in terms of like how to approach math, it's like so new minds, and it's such an invigorating way to do math. So I hope you'll come back again someday. We're probably going to turn this segment into more opportunities to have conversations. So we'd love to have you back again, maybe even in a week or two, to kind of like revisit as we talk to more parents and get more feedback about what they're struggling with. But just want to thank you again for coming on. Any final words to share with the world right now and how to handle this? Yeah.
Yeah, they are unprecedented times for sure. And I think this, now more than ever, kindness and grace and communities is going to be what we need. So enjoy. It's an unfortunate way to all be quarantined together, but it's an opportunity, as the New Minds group says all the time, right? To really embrace it and learn about each other in a totally different way.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So World Numi Nation, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for giving us a warm welcome to Kathy. I thought it was an awesome conversation full of gems. So watch this one again and again. Take notes. I think it's gonna reward you. So thank you, Numi Nation. Thank you, Kathy. We'll talk to you again soon. And everybody have a fantastic evening. We'll see you tomorrow for episode 17.
Thank you, guys. Okay. Bye-bye.